Inside America's bloodiest prison yards. Every prison yard has rules. Some are written by the administration. Others are enforced by men serving life sentences. But inside America's bloodiest prison yards, survival depends on understanding a completely different system. A system where one wrong look can trigger a riot, where entire racial armies control sections of concrete, and where violence can erupt before guards have time to react. In these yards, hundreds of men walk freely together. And sometimes, that freedom lasts only seconds. What happens inside these prison battlefields reveals a hidden world most people will never see. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe and leave a comment sharing where you're watching from. America's prisons house more than 1 million incarcerated people. Most facilities operate quietly. Meals are served. Count times are completed. Inmates attend work assignments and educational programs. But some prison yards have earned a different reputation. Over decades, certain institutions became known not for rehabilitation, but for violence. Places where gangs built empires. Places where racial divisions became battle lines. Places where prison staff often found themselves trying to prevent wars rather than simply maintain order. Today, we're stepping inside some of America's most dangerous prison yards. We'll examine how they became so violent, the unwritten rules inmates follow to stay alive, and what really happens when hundreds of dangerous men are released into the same enclosed space. And as you'll discover later, some of the deadliest incidents didn't begin with weapons. They began with something far smaller. A rumor. The prison yard, the most dangerous place in prison. To understand why prison yards become so deadly, you first have to understand their purpose. A prison yard exists because even the most restrictive prisons must provide inmates with exercise and outdoor access. For a few hours each day, cell doors open. Hundreds of men leave their housing units. And for a brief period, an institution designed around confinement becomes something else entirely. A small city. Within that city are neighborhoods. Different groups occupy different areas. Weight piles. Handball courts. Walking tracks. Picnic tables. Shaded corners. Every section has meaning. Every section has history. And every section has ownership. A new inmate quickly learns that prison yards are not random collections of people. They are carefully organized ecosystems. The organization isn't always visible to outsiders. But inmates notice immediately. Who sits where? Who works out together? Who controls access to contraband? Who settles disputes? Who gives orders? And who carries them out? The yard may look calm. But beneath the surface exists a constant struggle for influence. The danger comes from one simple fact. Unlike inside a housing unit, prison yards create opportunity. Opportunity to communicate. Opportunity to conduct business. Opportunity to recruit. And opportunity to attack. Many prison murders occur in places where victims cannot easily escape. A prison yard provides exactly that environment. Once violence begins, movement becomes limited. Chaos spreads rapidly. And dozens of inmates may become involved before staff regain control. What makes matters worse is that attacks are often planned long before they occur. Weeks. Months. Sometimes years. A man may walk into a yard believing it is just another day. Meanwhile, someone else has been waiting for that exact moment. And in some institutions, those moments became terrifyingly common. When gangs took control. By the 1970s and 1980s, American prisons were changing. Gang influence was expanding rapidly. Organizations that had once existed primarily on city streets began establishing power inside correctional institutions. Some groups discovered something important. Prisons offered a captive audience. Potential recruits couldn't leave. Communication networks already existed. And fear could be used as a powerful recruiting tool. California became one of the most significant battlegrounds. Prison gangs such as the Mexican Mafia, Nuestra Familia, Aryan Brotherhood, and Black Guerrilla Family transformed the prison landscape. Their influence extended far beyond individual cells. Entire yards became territories. Orders issued from prison could affect criminal activity hundreds of miles away. A gang leader serving a life sentence might wield more influence than a gang member living freely outside prison walls. That power came from discipline. And discipline often came through violence. Failure to follow orders could result in severe consequences. Refusing gang directives. Associating with rivals. Providing information to authorities. Even appearing weak. Any of these actions could lead to punishment. The yard became the stage where these punishments were carried out. Publicly. Deliberately. As a warning to everyone watching. And what happened next would help create some of the bloodiest prison riots in American history. The riot at New Mexico State Penitentiary. In February 1980, one of the deadliest prison uprisings in American history erupted inside the New Mexico State Penitentiary. What began as a security failure quickly became a nightmare. Inmates gained control of large portions of the prison. For hours, chaos reigned. Guards lost control. Hostages were taken. Rivalries exploded. Old grievances resurfaced. The violence that followed shocked even experienced correctional officials. When order was eventually restored, dozens of people were dead. Many others were seriously injured. Investigations later revealed deep systemic problems. Overcrowding. Poor conditions. Inadequate supervision. Tension that had been building for years. The riot became a warning. A reminder that prisons are not isolated from society's problems. They often concentrate them. And when pressure reaches a breaking point, the results can be catastrophic. But New Mexico was only one chapter. Other prison yards would soon earn reputations just as deadly. And one California prison would become infamous around the world. Pelican Bay's war zone. When Pelican Bay State Prison opened in 1989, it was designed to control the most dangerous inmates in California. Located near the Oregon border, far from major cities, the prison quickly became known for housing influential gang members. Its security housing unit gained international attention. But outside those isolated cells, the prison yards developed their own reputation. A reputation built on violence. Former correctional staff described periods when tensions were so high that administrators constantly monitored intelligence reports. A single conflict could trigger retaliation. Retaliation could trigger another response. The cycle sometimes continued for months. Certain inmates entered the yard already knowing violence was expected. Some carried homemade weapons. Others watched carefully for signs of an impending attack. The atmosphere could change instantly. One moment inmates were exercising. The next, alarms were sounding. Officers rushed toward unfolding violence while trying to identify participants among hundreds of prisoners. Yet despite strict security measures, gangs continued adapting. Communication methods evolved. Power structures shifted. And prison administrators faced a difficult challenge. How do you prevent organized violence when the organizations themselves are built around secrecy? The answer was never simple. And in some cases, it proved impossible. What happened in another California prison demonstrates exactly why. The Gladiator days. During the late 1980s and early 1990s, California prisons experienced a period later referred to by some observers as the Gladiator days. The phrase remains controversial, but it reflects widespread concerns about repeated violent confrontations occurring inside prison yards. Certain facilities became known for frequent racial conflicts. Large fights erupted between rival groups. Weapons appeared with alarming regularity. Emergency response teams were deployed repeatedly. Investigations and lawsuits would later examine how some incidents unfolded. Questions emerged. Could certain conflicts have been prevented? Were warning signs ignored? Were prison administrators overwhelmed by the scale of gang influence? Answers varied depending on who was asked. But one fact remained clear. The yards had become battlefields. For inmates, survival often depended on understanding politics that outsiders never saw. A simple mistake could have devastating consequences. Sitting in the wrong area. Speaking to the wrong person. Failing to respond during a confrontation. Every decision carried risk. And the most dangerous part? Many inmates were not gang members at all. Yet they were still forced to navigate the same environment. An environment where neutrality often provided little protection. Surviving the yard. For newcomers entering a dangerous prison yard, the first lesson is observation. Watch before acting. Listen before speaking. Understand before choosing sides. Former inmates often describe the first weeks as a period of intense learning. Every prison has rules. Many are unwritten. Some concern respect. Others concern safety. Violating them can attract unwanted attention. Attention is dangerous. The goal for many inmates becomes simple. Remain predictable. Avoid unnecessary conflict. Do not create problems. Do not become a target. Yet even those strategies offer no guarantees. A yard attack can happen without warning. A dispute elsewhere in the prison can affect everyone. Racial tensions can suddenly escalate. Lockdowns may last weeks or months. Privileges disappear. Movement stops. Life shrinks back to a cell. Then one day the yard reopens. And inmates step back into the same environment. Waiting to see whether peace will hold. Or whether violence is about to return. And sometimes, the warning signs are almost invisible. The weapons of the yard. One question often puzzles outsiders. How do inmates obtain weapons inside highly secured prisons? The answer reveals another layer of prison reality. Improvised weapons can be made from ordinary materials. metal fragments, plastic components, pieces of institutional equipment. Objects that seem harmless can be transformed through patience and ingenuity. Correctional staff conduct searches constantly. Cells are inspected. Common areas are monitored. Intelligence units investigate threats. Yet weapons continue to appear. Their existence reflects an uncomfortable truth. In environments where violence remains possible, some inmates believe being armed is essential for survival. Others acquire weapons because they intend to use them. This arms race contributes significantly to prison violence. A fistfight is dangerous. A coordinated attack involving weapons can be deadly. And when dozens of participants become involved, the consequences can spread across an entire institution. But the deadliest yard conflicts are rarely spontaneous. Most begin long before anyone sees the first punch. The moment everything changes. Veteran correctional officers often describe a strange phenomenon. Just before major violence erupts, the atmosphere changes. Conversations become shorter. Movement patterns shift. Certain inmates appear unusually alert. Others quietly leave specific areas. To an outsider, nothing seems different. To experienced staff, something feels wrong. Then it happens. A signal. A confrontation. An attack. Within seconds, a peaceful yard transforms into a crisis scene. Officers issue commands. Emergency alarms activate. Response teams deploy. Medical personnel prepare for casualties. Dust rises from concrete. Inmates scatter. Some fight. Others flee. And in those moments, every decision matters. For inmates. For staff. For everyone trapped inside the walls. Because once violence begins, control becomes difficult to restore. And as history has shown repeatedly, some prison yards have paid a terrible price for losing that control. Why the bloodiest yards exist. America's bloodiest prison yards did not become dangerous overnight. They emerged from decades of complex factors. Gang rivalries. Overcrowding. Institutional challenges. Violence imported from the streets. And human beings placed under extreme pressure. The yard itself is only a stage. The real story begins long before inmates step outside. It begins with the systems surrounding them. The choices they make. The loyalties they carry. And the conflicts they refuse to abandon. For prison administrators, maintaining safety remains an ongoing challenge. For correctional officers, every shift carries uncertainty. For inmates, survival often depends on understanding realities invisible to the outside world. And for the rest of society, these prison yards offer a reminder. Walls can contain people. They cannot automatically eliminate the forces that brought those people there. The yard generals. Inside America's most violent prisons, power is rarely held by the loudest man. It is usually held by the man who speaks the least. The man who never appears rushed. The man who doesn't need to prove himself. Among inmates, these individuals are sometimes referred to as shot callers. Prison administrators may transfer them, isolate them, or monitor them constantly. Yet influence often survives even when freedom does not. A shot caller's authority comes from reputation. Years of loyalty. Years of violence. Years of proving that orders will be obeyed. In some prison systems, these men become the unofficial leaders of entire groups. Their decisions affect hundreds of inmates. They can authorize peace. They can authorize retaliation. And sometimes, they can authorize death. What makes this system so difficult to combat is that it often operates through indirect communication. A message moves from one inmate to another. Then another. Then another. By the time it reaches its destination, no written evidence exists. No recording exists. Just a chain of understanding. Correctional intelligence officers spend countless hours attempting to map these networks. Sometimes they succeed. Other times, the structure shifts before authorities can fully understand it. And when leadership changes, instability often follows. Because in prison, power vacuums can be just as dangerous as power itself. The next conflict might begin with a disagreement over territory. Or money. Or respect. But what happens when entire racial groups become involved? The answer has led to some of the largest prison riots in American history. When race becomes a battle line. One of the most difficult realities of many American prisons is the role race has played in daily life. Outside prison walls, social groups are often fluid. Inside prison, the environment can be very different. Upon arrival, many inmates quickly discover that affiliations matter. In some institutions, racial divisions influence housing arrangements, recreation groups, and social interactions. These divisions did not appear overnight. They developed over decades through gang rivalries, prison politics, and repeated cycles of violence. For some inmates, participation is voluntary. For others, it feels unavoidable. A newcomer entering a violent prison yard may immediately face questions. Who are you with? Where do you stand? Who will protect you if violence breaks out? The answers can determine how safely an inmate navigates prison life. Correctional officials have spent years attempting to reduce these divisions. Many have achieved progress. Yet in certain facilities, old loyalties remain powerful. The danger becomes greatest when a conflict involving a few individuals expands into something larger. A personal dispute can become a group dispute. A group dispute can become a racial conflict. And a racial conflict can engulf an entire prison yard. What begins with 2 people can suddenly involve hundreds. The consequences often last long after the fighting ends. Because prison remembers. And prison rarely forgets. The 2006 Chino prison riot. In 2006, one of California's largest prison riots erupted at the California Institution for Men in Chino. The violence spread rapidly. Hundreds of inmates became involved. Correctional staff fought to regain control. Smoke rose above the facility. Emergency resources were deployed. The disturbance highlighted a recurring challenge facing prison administrators. Large populations create large risks. When tensions escalate among hundreds or thousands of inmates, controlling events becomes extraordinarily difficult. Investigations later examined the causes. As often happens in prison violence, there was no single explanation. Instead, multiple factors combined. Existing rivalries, group loyalties, institutional pressures, all converged into a situation that quickly overwhelmed normal operations. For the public, the riot was a shocking news story. For correctional professionals, it was another reminder of how fragile order can become inside a prison environment, especially when the yard transforms from a recreation space into a battlefield. But not every deadly prison yard is located in California. Thousands of miles away, another institution earned a reputation that still lingers today. Angola, the farm of fear. Louisiana State Penitentiary is unlike almost any other prison in America. Covering thousands of acres, it is the largest maximum security prison in the United States. Its nickname, Angola, comes from the former plantation that once occupied the land. The prison's history is deeply connected to violence. For much of the 20th century, Angola became known for brutal conditions. Former inmates described an environment where survival required constant awareness. The prison's enormous size created unique challenges. Entire communities existed behind its fences. Work crews operated across vast areas. Movement covered greater distances than in many other prisons. Over the years, reforms transformed many aspects of life at Angola. Yet its history remains a powerful reminder of how prison culture evolves. The institution once recorded murder rates that shocked observers. Some years were marked by repeated killings. Investigations uncovered corruption, abuse, and systemic failures. Today, Angola presents a different image than decades ago. But its past reveals an important lesson. A prison yard does not become violent because of concrete. It becomes violent because of the culture surrounding it. And changing culture is far harder than building walls. The officers in the middle. Whenever prison violence is discussed, attention usually focuses on inmates. But another group faces danger every day. Correctional officers. Their responsibility sounds straightforward. Maintain order. Enforce rules. Protect staff and inmates. In reality, the job is far more complicated. A single officer may supervise dozens or even hundreds of inmates. They must identify threats before violence occurs, interpret intelligence reports, recognize gang dynamics, and respond instantly when emergencies erupt. During major yard disturbances, officers often place themselves directly between opposing groups. The risk is enormous. Many correctional officers have been injured while restoring order. Others have lost their lives in the line of duty. The public rarely sees these moments. They occur behind walls, away from cameras, away from headlines. Yet for prison staff, the possibility is always present. Every alarm could signal a fight. Every fight could become a riot. And every riot creates uncertainty. Because once hundreds of people become involved, prediction becomes nearly impossible. Still, many officers return to work day after day, knowing exactly what can happen. And exactly what has happened before. Lockdown. After a major yard incident, prison life changes immediately. The first response is often lockdown. Movement stops. Programs end. Recreation ends. Work assignments stop. Entire housing units may remain confined for days, weeks, or even months. To outsiders, lockdown might sound simple. To inmates, it can feel endless. Meals arrive through cell doors. Conversations become limited. Days blend together. Investigators interview witnesses. Staff search cells. Gang intelligence units analyze information. Administrators attempt to determine exactly what happened. Meanwhile, tensions continue simmering. Many inmates know the conflict is not truly over. It has merely paused. Some fear retaliation. Others anticipate it. The challenge for prison officials is finding a way to reopen the institution without reigniting the violence. Sometimes they succeed. Sometimes the cycle begins again. And what happens next is often shaped by information. Who knows what? Who believes what? And who is willing to act on it? Informants and the cost of information. Information is one of the most valuable commodities in prison. Knowing about an upcoming attack. Knowing who ordered it. Knowing where weapons are hidden. Knowing which groups are preparing for conflict. This knowledge can save lives. It can also place lives in danger. Throughout prison history, informants have occupied one of the most difficult positions imaginable. Some cooperate with authorities seeking protection. Others provide information for personal reasons. Regardless of motivation, discovery can carry severe consequences. Prison culture often places enormous importance on loyalty. Breaking that code may result in isolation from former associates. In some cases, far worse. This reality creates a challenge for investigators. Critical information exists, but obtaining it is rarely easy. As a result, prison intelligence units rely on multiple sources: observation, communication monitoring, confidential tips, behavioral patterns. Together, these pieces form a puzzle. Sometimes the puzzle reveals an attack before it occurs. Sometimes it does not. And when it doesn't, the consequences can be devastating. The men who never leave. Among the inmates who enter America's bloodiest prison yards, some know they will never leave prison alive. Life sentences are common in maximum security institutions. Many inmates have spent decades behind bars. Some arrived in their 20s. They are now elderly men. The passage of time creates a unique psychological environment. For individuals serving life without parole, future opportunities become limited. The outside world grows distant. Technology changes. Families change. Entire generations pass. Yet prison remains. For some, this reality encourages reflection and personal transformation. For others, it deepens resentment. The yard becomes their world. The prison becomes their community. Its politics become their politics. Its conflicts become their conflicts. And when a person has spent decades inside the same environment, those conflicts can take on enormous significance. Much greater significance than outsiders often understand. Which raises a difficult question. Can a prison truly eliminate violence? Or can it only manage it? The answer remains debated even today. The last walk to the yard. As evening approaches, movement slows. Groups disperse. Officers begin clearing the yard. One by one, inmates return to their housing units. The noise fades. Weights stop clanging. Conversations end. For a brief moment, the yard becomes quiet. Almost peaceful. But history tells a different story. These same spaces have witnessed murders, riots, assaults, and conflicts involving hundreds of people. Places intended for exercise became symbols of power. Places intended for recreation became battlegrounds. And yet every morning, the cycle begins again. Gates open. Inmates emerge. The yard fills with life. Some men will exercise. Some will socialize. Some will conduct business. And some may already know that violence is coming. Because inside America's bloodiest prison yards, the most dangerous thing is not the concrete. It is uncertainty. The uncertainty of who holds power. The uncertainty of who feels threatened. The uncertainty of what might happen next. Behind every prison wall exists a struggle between order and chaos. Most days, order wins. But the days people remember are the days when it doesn't. And those days leave scars that can last for generations. Inside America's bloodiest prison yards, survival often depends on rules that exist far beyond official prison policy. Behind the fences, the watchtowers, and the razor wire, a hidden world continues to operate, one shaped by power, loyalty, fear, and violence. Thank you for watching. If you found this documentary informative, leave a comment with your thoughts and let us know what prison, criminal case, or hidden story you'd like to see explored next. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and remember, some of the most dangerous battles in America happen far from public view. Good night.